Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Licensing and Registration Committee meeting on Monday, the 20th of January 2025. We will move to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one apology this evening, and that's from Councillor Bradley Thompson, who's at work today in London.
Thank you. We now move to item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which can be found on pages 7 to 18. If we could have somebody to propose. Dan and yep, Councillor Cousins, thank you. We'll now move to item 3 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Councillor Smith.
Good evening. I hold a London taxi licence, but I have no ties in that capacity to Tendring District Council. And also items 7 and 8 come under my portfolio, and I have been consulted on the proposed increases, so I would ask that I sit out of these items.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We'll now move to item 4 on the agenda, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
None received, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So we move to item 5, which is the miscellaneous licensing subcommittee, which can be found on pages 19 to 20. Do we have somebody to propose those? Councillor Cousins, and seconded Councillor Smith. Thank you. We'll now move to item 6, which is the Premises Personal Licences Subcommittee, which can be found on pages 21 to 28. And the same again, if we could have somebody to propose. Councillor Smith. Sorry. It's fine. It's just to receive them. Councillor Cousins, thank you. We will now move to item 7 on the agenda, which is the report of the Assistant Director of Housing and Environment, A1 Operations and Delivery, Housing and Environment, proposed fees and charges for animal licensing and beauty treatment licensing. These are 2 separate items. Thank you.
I think you've made the declaration, so I think if you're happy to move to the public gallery, then that would be handy.
Good evening, everyone. The first item I'd like to bring to the committee is the report for the increase in animal licensing and beauty licence treatments for 2025-26, and get your concurrence on that. These are for our statutory functions that we perform in the Environmental Health Service around animal licensing and beauty treatment. Before, I'd just like to bring your attention to a couple of things that are incorrect in the report. Pages 29 at the bottom, there should be a this rather than next year. Pages 32, the wrong year is inserted at the bottom, it should be 25-26. Page 37, there's a spelling mistake, it should be managers, not mangers. And 55, on page 55, the year says 24-25, it should be 25-26. Okay. Yeah, the increase in fees this year is going to be 2.3% in accordance with the predicted CPI for April 25-26. Has anybody got any comments on that at all? No?
If there's no comments or questions, Councillor Casey. Thank you.
How much is it in pounds, shillings and pence has it gone up then?
Sorry?
How much is it, just the percentage on whatever their bill is? Or
Yeah, on the statutory ones that we can change and we can charge a fee for, there are some there that basically they're set by the governing body, whether it be DEFRA or whatever, and they are changed as and when they see fit. But everything else that we can add a percentage to, we have, and we have worked that out on our time, and etc. What we have to spend to do that specific function. And again, we have to make sure that we don't make a profit. So we can't make a surplus. So it has to be worked out to the dot. So.
Any other questions? Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that then, we've come to 2.3%, so I know we mustn't make a profit, but have we covered costs or at least got close to covering costs?
Yes, we have, yeah.
Thank you, that's
that
fine.
exercise is carried out, and last year I've done a time and motion study on everything to make sure that those figures were accurate, and we've just built that in for the new year, the new fund.
Thank you, that's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? No, there are none. So we will move to the recommendations, which can be found on page 30. So recommends that the schedule of fees and charges 25/26 for operations and delivery / housing and environment as set out in Appendix A be agreed as follows, namely that 1. The current fees and charges in place since April 24 as set out in column A of Appendix A be noted, and 2. The proposed fees and charges for 25/26 as set out in column B of Appendix A be approved with effect from the 1st of April 2025, and 3. The Assistant Director for Housing and Environment be authorised to publish the animal licensing and beauty treatment licensing fees in accordance with the relevant legislative provisions. Proposed by Councillor Bray.
So proposed, yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Davidson. Thank you.
Is everybody in favour of that? Could you please show by hands? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 8 on the agenda, which is again the report of the Assistant Director of Housing and Environment, A2, Housing and Environment, / caravan site licensing, / proposed fees and charges for 25/26, which can be found on pages 45 to 60. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item I'd like to bring before the committee is the proposed increases in charges for caravan site licences. These cover the protected sites, which are your residential mobile home sites, and we charge fees for our work involved in the licensing process and also inspection fees for the coming year. These fees do not cover holiday site licences, as they are not chargeable. So this is just basically for any site that's residential. Again, I'd like to bring your attention to a couple of errors. On page 45, it should be this year instead of next. And the same on page 46, there should be this year instead of next. And halfway down the page, there is a / missing between 2025 and 26. Again, as with the previous report, the fees and charges are being lifted by 2.3% in accordance with the proposed current CPI for April 2025-26. And the charges can be found in the appendix at the end of the report. Appendix A, if you would have a look and see if you're in agreement with the proposed charges that are being increased. So last year's fees are in column A and the proposed ones are in column B. In addition to the licences that we issue for these sites, you'll see at the bottom there are fees that are chargeable for a transfer of a site licence. That can be when there's a change of ownership, etc. An amendment of a site licence, that is in instances where we may have a change in planning permission or occupancy of the site. There's also a fee there for checking and registering of site rules, which apply to these residential sites. And the final one is all residential sites now have to have a responsible person who is DBS checked and who can go on the fit and proper register to say that they're fit to run the site. So, any questions from anybody?
Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. Same question again, really. Obviously, again, I don't believe we're allowed to make profit here, but are we covering costs or as close to as possible? Thank you.
Yes, again, the same exercise was carried out for this. We basically do a time and motion study across the whole, all of our functions that we do, and a lot of time to that, an hourly rate, and break it down, and then that's where the fee comes from. And then this year we've just added the CPI on top again.
Thanks, Chair.
Any further questions from any other members? No. I'd just like to make an observation. Obviously, it's reading through, saying that the costs associated with providing the service have increased over the past year. So I think they're quite, looking at them, they look sort of, they're not too steep.
No.
So I don't think it will affect people too much there.
No.
Lovely.
And they are a business, so
yeah, no, it's good. Right, if there are no further questions, we'll move to the recommendations, which are on page 46 for those of you that haven't found them. So the recommendations that the schedule of fees and charges for the 25-26 for housing and environment licensing of the residential mobile homes as set out in Appendix A be agreed insofar as that 1. The proposed fees and charges for the 25/26 as set out in column B of Appendix A be approved with effect from the 1st of April 2025, and 2. That the Assistant Director for Housing and Environment be authorised to publish the mobile homes in brackets residential protected sites fees and charges in accordance with the relevant legislative provisions. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Davidson, and seconded by Councillor Casey. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Adrian can return. Lovely. We'll now move on to item 9, which is the report of the Director of Governance, A3, various licensing provisions, applications approved under delegated powers. This item can be found on page 61 to 64.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks to provide the committee with an update on Q3 of the figures for licensing applications. You'll see some slight changes in regards to the amount of applications we've received, and I've got a short presentation here, a couple of slides just to give you an update of what applications the licensing team have processed over that quarter. So you'll see on the first screen there, we've got a layout of vehicle applications where we've had 6 grant applications, 39 renewals, temporary insurance vehicle. We've also processed 4 change of owners and 7 change of vehicles within this quarter. Drivers, so as taxi drivers, we've got the suitabilities undertaken. We've had 12. We've had 22 knowledge tests undertaken, and we've done 15 renewals and 1 refusal. In relation to private hire grant operators, we've had 2 grant applications and 4 changes to the licences. Moving on, we've got those applications under the Licensing Act. Personal licences, we've processed 10. Premises grants, we've processed 13. Transfers, there's been 3. Change of designated premises supervisors is 23. Temporary event notices, we've done 23. We've also had to issue 5 temporary event notices, which stops the event going ahead because of various reasons, such as issuing a late temporary event notice. And we've had 2 of those applications referred to the licensing committee. Under the Gambling Act, we've had 1 adult gaming centre, 1 small society lottery, and 1 2 machine notification. Alongside that, we've carried out a number of annual fee processing and vehicle reminders, such as the MOT, insurance, and mechanical tests. Alongside that, the licensing team have also put in a survey. We've just started that in December, which we send out a link to those that have applied for a licence to ask them how our service has been. We've received 7 responses so far, and the feedback's been very positive. And it's good to see some of the comments about the team as well, how they've been processing along with the process of the applications. With that, that concludes my report.
So, Chairman, you've got your report in front of you, which is basically remained predominantly unchanged for a number of years. What last year we started to do was actually give you information based on quarters to try and hopefully make the information a little bit more digestible and meaningful. What Michael has done today is add to that information out there, because if you look at the report, part of it is about applications that have been processed. If you look at in the executive summary, 1, the premises license, club premises certificates, that is actually the number of applications that have been received in that. Then look at number 2, personal licenses, and that actually is just the total number of personal licenses at the end of that quarter. So what we're trying to do is just give you more meaningful information over time. So we've adjusted it over the last year, as I say, by putting the quarters in there. We're starting to look at this underlying information that Michael's just referenced to you, to try to improve yet further the information that's coming to you and make it meaningful. And certainly in discussion with the committee's chairman and vice chairman, what we would like to do is also look at across years. So now that we've got the quarter by quarter data, is actually present how that compares with perhaps the previous year, so that actually within year cycles can start to be picked up. Is it the case that Hackney Carriage and private hire driver licence numbers increase and decrease in different quarters? We hopefully will be able to give you that information. Or is it a progressive situation across the years, so either increasing or decreasing or staying flat? So that's where we're trying to get to with this information, so that you as a committee have yet more information at your fingertips about what is happening amongst the range of different licensees that you are responsible for as a committee. So that's what was behind what we've done today, which is present you with the same information as you previously had, give you an inkling that there's some underlying data that might be useful to bring out in future reports, and to reference to you that what we're looking to do is to give you year-on-year data, which hopefully will give you further information in addition to the quarter by quarter. And Michael referenced the survey results. So we've now started, I think it was probably December that we started sending those out, those links. We are getting those responses. The questions that we're asking in that survey are based actually on best value user satisfaction surveys. Across the country, those have not been used for a while, but yet they do actually provide us with a benchmark back to when they were used a few years ago, and they meet a national standard about the quality of the questioning. So again, that's where what we are asking our licensees comes from. It comes from previous best value user satisfaction survey. It's healthy that we're getting 7 responses. If we take 7 responses in over just about a month, then we'd probably be looking at over 50, 60, 70 across a full year. And we think that that's quite helpful to us to get that feedback from licensees into the process, whether that's positive, yes, let's repeat good practice, or whether it represents something that is niggling to licensees and potentially we might be able to address either in change of language, change in processes, or other adaptations or better explanations to why we do things. So that's the intention behind that, and it's a good start. I think that we've had 7. It's not really, statistically significant at this stage to bring the results of that, but it's useful that we'd be using this meeting to tell you that we've started that, and we've started with a good footing, which is that 7 that we've had so far. Jem, thank you.
Thank you, and I think the committee would agree. I did notice that the surveys were in there, and I think it's really good that we're allowing people to give feedback into the council because of how the team does things, and if people are happy with things and if they're not so happy with things, we can obviously hopefully bring things back to our committee and have a relook. And I think you'll also agree that the figures that the team provide us with, they are helpful. I know myself and Anne earlier when we were going through, it's so good to have these figures put before us so we can see whether there's, tends to be sometimes a decline in sort of certain times of the years, but we can keep an eye on the figures of what's going on. Do we have any questions for Michael on this at all? We'll move to the recommendation that the committee notes the information set out in this report. Noted? Yep, everyone's happy with that. Thank you. We will now move on to item 10, which is the report of the Director of Governance, A4 Licensing Enforcement, Schedule of Routine Licensing Inspections for 2025. This can be found on pages 65 to 78.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to give the committee an update on the licensing enforcement schedule that was proposed last year, to give you an update on how we have done over the year, and also a proposal for the next year coming. On pages 73 to 75 are the proposed 2025 enforcement schedule proposals, and alongside that we've got pages 77 and 78 which are showing the 2023 and 2024 actual enforcement schedule of the routine inspections that have been carried out. You'll see on page 77, if I take for example the Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicles, you'll see that we've done exceptional more inspections in 2023 to 24. The reason behind that is the taxi policy actually came into play in 24, and previously we had to do vehicle inspections, visual inspections in-house. Since that, the policy has changed, where once the vehicle's 10 years old, they have to have an additional mechanical test carried out by our approved garage, making that more of a safety feature. So that's a reason for the slight decline in that. However, we have met our targets with doing the taxi rank inspections and some of the inspections that where we call the vehicles in. Again, with the street trading consent in 2023, you'll see there's a larger amount carried out there. Again, there's a reason behind that we actually had a review in 2023 where we were identifying how the pitches were used and carrying out quite a few more routine inspections.
Again, just to set out, this is the third year, so you're getting proposals for routine inspections in front of you. This is the third time we presented these to you, and we're still, I would say, on a learning curve in relation to it. It is designed to both underpin the fee charges that we make to make sure that we are going and visiting a full range of premises or individual licensees. And it's also designed, should be designed and is designed to provide sufficient space for reactive or responsive enforcement. So when a complaint comes in, we've still got the resource, hopefully, to give us the space to address that. But outside of that, what should we be doing, and the frequency of those inspections or those visits at the very least. So that's what it's designed to do, and we hope that that gives you that flavour and can indicate that broadly licensees can be satisfied that there is an element of level playing field, that we're going to be visiting them or other licensees at a frequency that we give due public notice of, and also says to the wider world that we're out there and we're watching and we're looking for unlicensed activities and therefore protecting licensees from unlicensed activities. So there's a multitude of reasons why we've adopted this, and we are in the third year. We are using it as a guide in order to assess and direct that routine level of inspections. As Michael's already said, that itself will respond during a year. If something's happening, if we get intelligence that suggests that we need to spend a bit more time on something, but isn't a direct complaint-led response, so it's not an individual premises that we're having problems with noise nuisance or otherwise breaching their license conditions. This is just a general sense with which individual licensees in a particular area probably need to have a little bit more time spent on them. So we're trying to make sure that we can flex to achieve that, but whilst giving a more general approach which says to the world, we are out there, we will take our licensing authority responsibilities seriously, and will be out there looking at individual licensees, whichever type of license that we are dealing with at that particular point in time. So that's the basis of it. Third year, and we will be constantly, I think, just addressing those number of permits that we or authorisations that we can get to go and see. Michael and I have certainly been talking about ways in which we can do that and make sure that the recording is improving constantly each year, so that we don't mismatch things. So if we go and stop a vehicle with a driver in it, that actually there's two things that we can inspect therefore. There's the driver and the vehicle. So I think it's just making sure that we're capturing that situation rather than missing it and missing that recording element. So some of our information needs to be yet further improved as we continue on this process of just refining this whole activity. Chairman.
Thank you. And just an observation, I think those figures, in my view, do look sort of quite impressive with the team. They are getting out and about and they are getting round, and I think it's keeping that connection going. As much as the inspections are important, it's important that they're connected with our community as well, which is really good. Any questions from members? Councillor Davidson first.
Announced visits or they unannounced visits? You do unannounced visits to licensed premises?
It is a mixture of both. A lot of the visits, specifically in regards to the Licensing Act, so they're pretty much all unannounced. Rank inspections are unannounced. There are occasions when we do call Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicles in. They know they're coming for that point, but a large majority are unannounced.
I understood that from what was said, but what about premises? Do you do unlicensed premises? Do you do unannounced visits on licensed premises?
Chairman, just to say again, this is that basic routine inspections bill rather than that complaint-driven one. So certainly if we're anticipating that an issue at a venue, then we would reserve that right to sort of give it an unannounced visit. So it's probably, you know, on balance, it's probably going to be arranged or, you know, is obvious. So if we're in an area, then it will be obvious that we're inspecting that. But where there's a complaint-driven one, then that will be a range of activities related to what the complaint concerns.
Obviously, if it's an announced visit, everything's going to be put right. If it's an unannounced visit, that's when you're going to see the trueness of any premise. That's the only thing.
You know, we acknowledge that, Bill, okay. But then again, I think in some ways, and Joe referenced it, and I apologise I didn't say it, which is actually that in part of this is getting to know our licensees and talk to them. So it isn't intended to be. It never should be oppressive in nature, but it should be trying to just make sure that people know that we're there and know that if there are issues that we can raise it with them, but also pick up issues to then bring back and go, well, I'm getting the same noise, almost back to that survey that we're talking about. We're getting the same noise from a range of licensees about an issue, that perhaps somebody's trading when they shouldn't be trading, and that they're getting that noise. It actually provides us with information to then feed into the wider enforcement activity. So you're right, there's a limit to what it will show up, but hopefully it will give us information to feed into a wider enforcement activity.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you. I'm looking at the pavement licence, the very last one on the list, and I've been to numerous meetings of the local residents for at least 3 or 4 of our villages, and they're all complaining, I think, about the pavement furniture and how infrequently they believe the inspectors as we call them, the enforcement officers, come round to have a look. And I noticed there are 3 you have on here, obviously subject to staff numbers, etc. It must be very difficult you can't spread yourself that thinly, I know that, because you can't be everywhere. And you can't obviously tell me the 3 that you've viewed, but we've had complaints, especially about people who have mobility problems in wheelchairs, people trying to push buggies. People are encroaching onto the pavement. They're getting further and further out. We've now, I think I seem to remember A-frames were banned. Were they not? Was there something that came up at one of the meetings where A-frames were not supposedly the suitable thing outside shops. I was trying to remember back. But there are people who have not only A-frames, but they've got that and tables and chairs outside the shop. You can walk past them, but right against the roadside, they've got then another lot of tables. And Connaught Avenue is very narrow now. Makes it very difficult to move. But not only that, but we also have people who have their advertisements on vans, and of course, because they're movable objects, you can't really do anything about that. But they've got A-frames that are blowing around in the wind, they're going in the road, causing all sorts of problems. And unless I itemise them individually and came back to the officers, which is probably something I might have to do about this, I was just a little bit worried that they don't always listen, I don't think, do they? I know they're not necessarily enforceable.
Chairman, just, I mean, Councillor Cousins has raised up what I think is a you know, an important point, and as you recognise, there's a capacity issue of the authority, which, you know, we're talking about in here potentially as few as one visit per year on a routine basis. But that's what I was saying earlier, is it's designed hopefully to give us the space to look at responsive, reactive enforcement based on complaints or information that we receive. What I would suggest is actually probably that we arrange just for a walk along Connaught Avenue with you, with Alfie or Michael, and then we can go through the issue of A-frames and who is authorising those or not, and the individual pavement licences and those venues that potentially either don't need a pavement licence or don't have a pavement licence from us. So we can probably take you on, and therefore make sure that when you talk with those residents, you're informed as to what the council is able to do through its licensing function.
Connaught Avenue. So
and I think a walk along there hopefully will give you the information that you need in order to answer the questions that you will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cousins. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly different subject area. I was looking at the capacity issue. Obviously, you have a capacity resource limit. There'll be a limit to your resources. So given these are the routine, this is the schedule for routine inspections, what percentage of your overall capacity is used on routine? And at what point would the, shall we say, a spate of complaints that needed urgent looking at interfere with your schedule? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, you know, others, and probably Alfie's here, but he can talk about this, and Michael might be able to talk about where it's pitched. You know, as a rule of thumb, you would hope that it would be looking at something like 50% of that capacity, leaving 50% available for responsive and reactive enforcement. However, saying that, and you know, I think you've hinted at it in the question, if we received a spate of complaints, that would probably put on ice any routine inspections, because quite clearly we would need to respond to those, and we would therefore park this. If that then later on in the year gave us the space to return to it, then we would return to it and we'd bring the report back to you saying, do you know what, we couldn't achieve everything in that year as our routine inspections because of what's happened in the year by way of information that we've received.
Thank you, Chairman. Keith managed to deal with the second part of my question in the first part, so that's done. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful to know, because on the other foot we can look at it, and if they're quiet, then there will be more of these done if there aren't a lot of complaints coming. So I think it's like you're saying, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it, which is really good. Are there any other questions from committee members? Right, we'll go back to where we were, which is the recommendations, which can be found on page 65. So recommendations is recommend that the committee takes note of the inspections carried out in the 23/24, Appendix B, and B, considers the need and frequency for routine inspections with a view to achieving compliance with licensing requirements within the remit of this committee, and if satisfied, endorse the schedule of such inspections as set out at Appendix A to this report. And C, notes that the licensing manager will then make arrangements within the available resource to implement the endorsed routine inspection arrangements in 2025 and report on progress to this committee in time for it to inform consideration of a revised schedule for
This should be for 2026.
2026. Yeah. Lovely. Do we note that? Yeah, noted. All members note that. Right, we will move to item 11 on the agenda, which is the report of the Director of Governance, A5, proposed licensing fees and charges for the 25/26, which can be found on pages 79 to 90.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to seek the committee's approval for the schedule of fees and charges for our section for the next year going forward. We have laid out in the appendix the proposals. You'll see some light changes this year on the fees and charges, mainly those around supplier changes, which we have to charge at cost, mainly in relation to the MOGO plates and the replacement plates. A slight change in the amendment to private hire licence, such as additional registration amendments. And on page 88, you'll find that the pavement licence, now that that's come under our section permanently, we need to set the fees accordingly. So we've got the grant fee for 2 years, which is £250, and renewal fees, which is now 2 years at £175. Originally, the £100 was for 1 year as a temporary measure. And then the only other amendment is under the sex shop licence. You'll find that there is a renewal fee that's coming as we've sort of looked at the fees and made some changes there going forward.
Members, you've all had a chance to look at all of those figures. Do we have any sort of comments or questions at all? No. I think it's nice to see that some of the costs have sort of adjusted to, obviously, well, for our one sex shop within the district, they're probably quite pleased with that amendment. So if there are no questions, we will go to the recommendations. So it's recommended that 1, the proposed licensing fees and charges set out in Appendix A be approved with effect from the 1st of April 2025. In brackets, note this recommendation only applies to those fees and charges where the council has the discretion to determine the said fee, close brackets. 2, the licensing manager be authorised to publish the Hackney carriage and private hire licensing fees in accordance with the relevant legislative provisions, should any changes be applicable to advertise. And 3, that further to 2 above, the head of democratic services and elections be authorised to consider any objections received and determine the final fees payable in consultation with the chairman of this committee. Do we have a proposer, Councillor Casey, and a seconder, Councillor Davidson? All those in favour? That's carried. We will now move to item 12 on the agenda, which is the date of the next meeting of the committee.
Chairman, the suggestion would be either the 7th or the 8th of May. I think our preference would probably be the 7th.
The 7th is a Wednesday and the 8th is a Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Shall we go with the 7th? Lovely. That's good. So we'll now move on to item 13, which is exclusion of press and public. The committee is asked to consider passing the following resolution: that under section 100A in brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of agenda item 14 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 of part